Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back for another chapter read of 50 Years in Polygamy. I have to say that I have thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. I feel like I just appreciate how the author, Kristen Decker, is really being brutally honest about all aspects of the polygamous experience that she had. And I'm saying she because each person is different, but I appreciate her transparency in this. Okay, the camera is really on me. Like, hello, I know. Oh, y'all, here I go. Doing bloopers in the middle of filming, but it's just too much on me. Okay. Does that feel better? I think it feels better. Not that y'all watch me anyways. I feel like for the most part, this is definitely an audio thing. Like, play Tisha and keep it moving type of situation. Oh, me and my tangents. Anyways, let's go. This is chapter 36, Work, College, and Mom's Confessions. This is 1991. When I enrolled Keith in the Head Start preschool program in September, it opened up a half a day for me to pursue my college education. I had quit trying to fulfill my dreams. All of my life, I believed that if I tried and failed, the results would prove my stupidity. But my newfound friends were helping me realize that my dreams were worth pursuing and that I was smart enough to make them come true. If I didn't try, I was failing myself. One thing that I have learned over the years when it comes to education is there is no stop to it. There is no age limit to it. When you're ready, and if you're ready, go ahead and do so. Me, myself, I'm a little lazy. I did my 4 years. I was supposed to go back and do my master's. Got a little comfortable with the money that I was making. And as a result, here I am. But if you have a desire to further it, then go ahead and further it. Two of my dear OA friends literally supported my jittery, nervous body and walked me into the student center at Salt Lake Community College, SLCC, to take entrance exams. I've been out of school for 20 years, and since I was mentally absent so much of the time, I felt I hadn't learned very much. Just like everyone else with lousy grades, the system pushed me through. Even though I knew a lot of the reasons, I still felt unintelligent. Now, you guys remember one of the reasons why she feels like she struggled in school was because of some of the things that she was going through as a child with the abuse and things of that nature. Even though I knew a lot of the reasons, I still felt unintelligent. I was sure I would fail the math test. Maybe, just maybe, I barely passed the language arts exam since I loved to hang out and listen to intellectual, articulate people. As a kid, while I rubbed mom's feet and after her hard days at the hospital, we take the vocabulary quizzes in the Reader's Digest. I love them. After hours of text anxiety, I was amazed with the test results. I had aced the language series and would get to register into an English 101 course. Not surprisingly, my math scores placed me in remedial classes. I had to learn all types of basic math before I could take any of the 5 required college math courses. No matter what, I swore I wouldn't let my fear of failure stop me from trying to move forward. After the flourishing age of 39, with 5 children still living at home, and with funding from a displaced homemakers grant, I started my first few courses. My lifelong dream was still the same. I planned to become a certified elementary school teacher. In between my classes, I volunteered in Keith's Head Start class and my other children's classrooms whenever possible. One afternoon, Keith's teacher told me, "I think you should apply to be a substitute Head Start teacher. You are really great with children." There wasn't nearly enough time in the day to accomplish all that needed to be done. How could I possibly fit in a job? But we could sure use the money, and it would give me a lot more experience. Wondering if I truly lost my mind, I applied for the job in November and turned it over to God, the nice one I was learning more about. I was called to sub across the Salt Lake Valley a few times. By January 1991, I was offered a full-time assistant teacher position at Mill Creek Elementary School in Salt Lake. I moved my 3-day classes tonight and took the job. Good for you. Every day, amid my progressive joy, I was still petrified about the ongoing lies I thought I have to tell to feel and keep safe among the outsiders. No matter to whom I talked, my college peers, instructors, the teachers I worked with in Head Start, and the parents, I was frantic about how to cover up my lifestyle. I come to hate lying and dishonesty with a passion. For years, I'd been hashing out, separating and dissolving all the supposed necessary and completely unnecessary lies from my life. I would hate to be a part of a belief system that required me to hide who I was out of fear of being persecuted. But that's what she, went through. A lie was a lie, no matter which way it was or wasn't told, and neither was acceptable to me. However, by choosing to live and thrive in the midst of the outsiders, I thought I had to protect my family and myself with deceit. As an embryonic normal adult, I felt I had to lie more than I did as a student for 13 years in public school. Wow. Working and associating with normal, everyday, monogamous people was incredibly fulfilling and at the same time completely terrifying and nerve wracking. The risk wasn't only about losing out on a friendship, as it had mostly been when others found out I was a polygamous kid. Now it was about having no value or being judged as stupid, ineffective, a bad influence, or a derelict derlicit of a human being. I don't think I'm saying that right. Derelict. It may have been my fear of not being hired or possibly losing a job. I feared I'd forgotten what I told coworkers about my past 18 years off and on of teaching experiences in our group schools. What would I tell them if they wondered why my husband didn't come to staff Christmas dinners? How would I explain how and why I felt so inadequate and naive about appropriate normal systems others were accustomed to living with on the outside? What would others think about how inept and scared I was when it came to normal social skills? All of my concerns jabbered incessantly in my head. It haunted me in my college classes, with my instructors, in study groups, with my Head Start students, parents, and with other Head Start and public school staff where I worked. Yet each day seemed to convey more reward, gratitude, and peace. I was slowly feeling more comfortable and credible. I'd come to respect and appreciate the head teacher I'd worked with. She was an incredible example. She helped fill my developing esteem with acceptance, adoration, approval, and love. And every day on pins and needles, I wondered if she would treat me as well if she had known about my background and what I was really like. I like to think, because I have encountered some polygamists before in the work environment, and I would like to think that them telling me, or in this case, it was a woman, her telling me that she was a polygamist did not change the interaction that I had with her. I'd like to think that it actually made us closer because she was comfortable with sharing that information with me. I decided I needed to protect my friendship and job no matter the stories I had to fabricate. I was finding, thank my higher power, there were hardly any to come up with. In the fall of 1991, I was offered an assistant job close to home. I had the privilege of teaching with Keith's Head Start teacher, with whom I'd already worked with in the Jordan School District. One day, the principal came all the way from her office to the Head Start classroom to insist I go to the auditorium to get my picture taken. The photographer said there was someone in Head Start who didn't want to pose for a picture, she said. It's okay, I replied. Shauna took her picture with the kids. I'm just an assistant teacher and I hate having my picture taken. No, it's okay, the principal barked, pushing at my shoulders in the direction of the door. Now get yourself down there. Can I trust you to go down on your own, or will I have to walk with you? When the picture packets came back, I stashed mine inside my book bag with the intention to chuck it in the dumpster on my way to the parking lot, but I didn't. Behind the steering wheel in my car, I decided to brave a peak. Carnaged about what I might see, it took me a few minutes to pull my photos from the packets. These pictures of me, I was sure, like the few others I had seen and the ones that I hadn't dared look at for most of my life, would prove again how unattracted I was and remind me of how much I used to look down on that person. The first glance led me to believe the woman in the duplicate pictures wasn't me. I had never before seen Sophia in the reflection of my mirror as I saw her in those photos. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay, let's continue. I was stunned by her deep blue, sensitive eyes. They held compassion for the Sophia of years gone by. I saw the pretty woman Mark and others had asserted, one I never recognized before. This is the first time that she's seeing herself, you guys, for who she really is in a picture at like 39 years of age. She might even be older at this point. That is insane. Oh, here she goes. I was a 40-year-old woman. The first time I allowed myself the gift of physical acceptance. This is about to make me cry. Just because imagine going through your life, right, for 40 years and not seeing the beauty of yourself because you were taught not to. Like, that is what her experience has been. And this is her first time really seeing herself. And it was through a duplicate picture. Goodness gracious. Whew. The woman in the pictures was the beautiful woman I was learning to love, honor, and appreciate. In her, I could see and feel her love for life, others, and me, clear to the depths of her soul. Tears of overwhelming gratitude and wonder traveled down my cheeks into my mouth and onto my lap. My soul reminded me she believed and trusted in me when I felt no one else did. Looking back, I'm reminded of the constant opportunities my soul was giving me to learn. The principal's demand felt rude and demeaning, yet having my picture taken turned out to be a blessing in disguise. Dad entered Mom's kitchen, where she and I had been visiting. "Oh dear, my troublemaker is over here again," he said, sounding frustrated and cynical. He filled his glass with water, plucked an apple from the fridge, and went back to his headquarters, which consumed all of my mother's living room space. A few years previous to this, Dad had allowed Mom to move back upstairs, this time on the south end of the fourplex after one of his wives passed away. Oh, okay. So because one of his wives passed away, she got to get out the basement. Isn't that something? We ignored Dad and kept jabbering and gabbing while we ate Mom's delicious tuna salad, thickly spread on whole wheat toast. I love a good tuna salad, y'all. "Mom," I said, "in Leviticus 19:18 it says, 'Love thy neighbor as thyself.' Well, you've probably quoted that one to me at least a million times, all read exaggerated times in my life. What do you think those words really mean?" "Well," Mom hemmed and hawed for several moments. I guess it means, it means you treat other people at least as good or as better than you would treat yourself." That's exactly what I thought you might say, Mom. So how is it that you can truly love your neighbor as yourself if you don't love yourself? Goodness grief. I waited a few seconds before I pointed at her and then myself. "You and me, we have to come first. You learned it backwards, and then I believe you taught it to me backwards. It's supposed to be the other way around." "I guess I never thought of it that way," Mom said. "Before you die, Mom, I love it if you learn to love yourself as I am finally learning to love myself. It's really the right thing to do, you know. Believe me, God wants us to love ourselves first. In fact, it's necessary. Every day I am finding the more I genuinely love myself, the more capacity I have to love and to offer others." Mom looked at me sadly. Changing those concepts was as difficult as learning a new language. All of our lives, we've been taught one way. We were to think, to believe, and act the same. One thought, one mind, one straight and narrow path to the kingdom of God. That was pretty much it. If we obeyed, we might be there someday. Asking my 75-year-old mother to learn something outside of her fundamentalist box was like asking her to forget the English language and start speaking Latin. Still, her heart was open to my ideas because she saw tremendous changes in my life. "Sophia, You have a glimmering, bright light shining through your eyes every time I've seen you lately, Mom told me excitedly. It's like something wonderful has happened to you and you're coming alive. I don't see any signs of depression you were feeling. What is going on? My new positive attitude was starting to show as I took what felt like baby steps to happiness. This emerging insight and outlook were sometimes too freaky for those who knew me, my friends, family, and children. Y'all, I just thought of it. The book, and I might be slow, the book is 50 years in polygamy. She's 40. Does that mean she's going to be in polygamy for 10 more years? Goodness gracious. Okay, let's continue. Sorry, it came to my head and it was bothering me. I had to say it out loud. Either I was ostracized and called a weirdo, or I was described as full of the spirit of the Lord or the devil, depending on who was speaking. I was so grateful Mom wanted the kind of happiness and energy I was discovering. It was something she seldom felt or claimed as her own. It's okay, I continued. Don't be sad now. It's not your fault you believed it wasn't good to love yourself. It was what you were taught by your parents, so you wanted us to believe. Immediately, Mom's cheeks turned bright red, and she looked like she might cry. Her chest heaved up and down until I worried she might explode with emotion. How can I ever love myself, Sophia? I have such a profound hatred for myself sometimes. I can hardly bear it. I've always felt it there and it won't go away. Because she's been taught over the years that everything that she does is wrong. And of course, if you feel like you're not doing what you're supposed to do, then you're going to begin to hate parts of yourself. And as a result, this 75-year-old woman has spent 75 years or, a good portion of her life not liking parts of herself. That's sad. Mom pressed her palms on her palms on her forehead. My father always hated me, she cried out. He always treated me worse than garbage. He never had one kind word to say to me, not one. As hard as I try, I can't remember one kind word that ever came out of his mouth about me. I always wondered why. My precious mother began to gasp for air as I cried with her. Why? Why did he hate me so much? For a few more minutes, Mother spoke about some of the falsehoods and garbage she had embraced her whole life. My dad always put me down. Even as an adult, I could never please him. He hated me. Her grief and tears, her words turned to mumbling before she started to choke. She drank some more of her water and then grabbed a handful of tissues from the box on the table. She balled up the soft paper, blotted her eyes, and blew her nose. Before I realized that was happening, Mom got quiet. I was sure she could hear her deaf father's voice yelling in her head. Keep sweet, Vera. Keep the spirit of the Lord. It's a matter of life and death. Mom swallowed hard, took in several long breaths, and then muttered, I'm so sorry, Sophia. I have no right to talk about my father that way. He's a good man. He was a good man. Anytime she taps into that place where she's being honest and she's speaking about how this man really treated her, she then cowers back into what she was taught all of her life, when this is one of the most honest moments that she's had with her mom. I know I shouldn't ever bring up the past. All it does is cause trouble and hurts me and others even more. I know it hurts to talk about it, but the more you do, the sooner the pain starts to dissipate and go away. Talk about it as many times as it takes to eradicate the heartache you've held inside all these years. Then you'll learn you are worthy of love from yourself, your dad, and everyone. Mom wiped her eyes and face. She looked around the corner to see if Dad was nearby, and then she whispered, your dad says we shouldn't live in the past. The past is done and gone. Yeah, because he keeps doing things and he's not addressing them. So he doesn't want you to bring it up. And I get that the past is gone, but at what point? Because just because the past is gone doesn't mean that the feelings that are associated with the past are gone. I'm just saying. That's just my point, Mom. As long as that sickening garbage is inside of you, and it is, you are living in the past. It's not healthy to keep shoving it back down by claiming you'll lose the spirit of the Lord. What you hold inside becomes poisonous. You have to purge it so you can heal. I put my arm around my mom's shoulder. When Dad came around the corner, he looked at her, swollen, red eyes. Then he looked at me, anger. You see, Sophia, he snapped. Every time you come over here lately, you get your mom all riled up over something or other. Then she gets all upset or mad at me, and I have to deal with it. You don't understand, I tried to explain before he was off sidestepping us again. My father didn't have the courage or know-how to deal with mother's heartache and guilt. All he knew how to do was persuade her to keep the lid on tight and pretend there was nothing brewing, which was killing parts of her mother, because he doesn't want to deal with it. So as long as you act this way, then that's okay, because I don't have to deal with it. But forget what you're doing to the woman that you supposedly love. Trash. It was much easier for him and the rest of us polygamists to move into a realm of make-believe. There couldn't possibly be any real problems or troubles in the prophet's plural kingdom. Outbursts by any one of his 9 beautiful, perfect, sweet wives were trivial, and they knew they should deal with their sins of the flesh by more fasting and praying, more pleading with God to take away any feelings that weren't conducive to godhood. With my father's wives trying to handle their own issues, he could be encouraging his church members to bury their never-ending issues and get on with life. With most of them, he would have a say, and with the majority, he would surely be heard. Just before I left, I said to Mom, ever since Dad became Uncle Rulon's right-hand man and the group's leader, most of us kids have no longer had a dad. When I was a little girl, he'd hold me on his lap and rub my cheeks with his whiskers and tell me how much he adored my dainty little neck. I miss the times when our family was smaller. Dad only had 15 kids' names to remember back then. Now he doesn't know who I am, and he doesn't seem to care. Mom tried to cover him with her usual cloak of charity like we were all supposed to do. You know, his calling as our prophet takes precedence. He has to. I knew where she was going. I heard it thousands of times and had explained it too many times to my own children. As I walked away, I told Mom, just because Dad's calling is God's will, it doesn't give our dad back to us, nor does it stop the longing. On the back road towards home, I started to giggle. I realized my dad didn't know something about me. Since I started wearing a little makeup and was the first girl in the group to get my ears pierced, Dad knew me as his daughter who wore the Indian war paint and the fishing lures for earrings. At least I had a distinction from his other 50 plus adopted and biblical kids and biological kids. And it was truly an honor to have a title, even if it were troublemaker. All right, let's see if I could do this next chapter. Chapter 37, Religious Perpetrators. These are years 1992 to 1993. Nothing turns my stomach or tears me apart more than the mistreatment of children. Everyone, it seemed, either knew or believed that Gregory Maynard had committed and allowed horrendous acts against women and children. We were hunted and sickened by such despicable and criminal behaviors and wondered why Maynard had been able to be an abuser for so long. Now, the other men on the priesthood council, whom I had despised my entire life, John Thomas, was also accused of vicious and terrible acts. When you know, I feel like your body has a way of trying to warn you sometimes about these people. The story going around was that he had R'd and M'd some of his own children, as well as many others outside the family over the last 20 plus years. Shortly after this horrific news, and while I was caring for my aging mother, I was jolted awake by my father's loud, haunting cries. I crept out of bed, trying not to wake Mom, shut the door behind me, and tiptoed down the hallway toward the kitchen. I heard Dad's tormented, drawled out words. She tried to scream, but And then he threatened again to kill. Dad stammered between his sobs. I peeked around the corner. He was crouched over his old black tape recorder in front of him on the kitchen table. My dear God, oh dear God, he cried out. What have we done? What have we done? My father's body trembled in horror. When he mentioned the name Laura, I felt faint and nauseous. I realized Dad was recording a journal entry and I wasn't supposed to hear it, but I was riveted. My father tried to compose himself and speak clearly. She told me when he withdrew. Oh, y'all, this is a trigger. I'm going to have to put a trigger warning on this. Ooh, Jesus. She told me when he withdrew his bloody penis, he pointed to the huge knife on the side of the bed and once again warned her she would be killed if she ever told anyone. This was only a portion of Laura's account of her father's monstrous deeds. Her father was John Thomas. My remorse was unbearable. I felt extremely dizzy and fought to keep my breathing under control. My legs collapsed underneath me and my head hit the wall and then the floor. Suddenly, Dad was sitting next to me. He pulled my limp body to his chest and leaned against the wall. We both sobbed for a while. My body was boiling over with the anger at John and compassion for Laura. I was sure the pain would devour my heart. Through blurry eyes, I saw my mother leaning on the wall next to her door with tears welling in her eyes. Then, without warning, my forsaken, dejected little girl and young woman who had never been respected enough to be listened to finally let go of her rage. I told you. I've known ever since I first saw John Thomas when I was just a young girl he was a creep. Even then, I felt he was looking through my clothes. His presence always made me feel sick. I told you it was nearly impossible for me to sit through his monotone, tedious, sanctimonious sermons while feeling something was evil about him. Mark and I both knew something wasn't right. We felt the same way with Gregory Maynard, but who are we? Just stupid idiot peons. Our complaints and opinions held absolutely no value to you or Mom. No, something was defective about us. You once told me John had a few problems and the brethren had to call him to repentance for going over their heads. Oh, but don't worry, Sophia. It's nothing serious you should fret about. Pray to have an understanding spirit to help soften your heart toward John. We don't always know or understand what it is we feel, but we know he's a man of God. You taught me to listen to the still small voice of the Holy Ghost. Then you told me not to. While Dad listened to me, tears continued to stream down his pale cheeks. For a long moment, he stared back at me through red eyes. Then he dropped his head and shook it from side to side. I just don't know, Sophia. I just do not know anymore. Dad, if Mark and I, just dumb little peons in the group, had this witness, then why didn't you and Uncle Rulon as prophets? Why did Joseph call John Thomas in the first place? Why would God ever call vile abusers to be his chosen people's leaders? You believe those men were called in the name of God, right? And all of you, including the council members, upheld, defended, sustained, and harbored those two evil men. And believe me, there are still more evil perverts in the group yet to be discovered. She's right. And good for her. I think that is the young lady who she was in the tent with, who was crying and stuff. And the father ended up coming to get her. But the picture of that, what he's describing, and why is he recording it on a recording device? Why aren't we going to the police with this? I don't get it. In my childhood, I endured only a minimal amount of terror, sexual, physical, and verbal abuse as compared to so many children in polygamous families. Take that into account. She just told us that she only endured. First of all, I hate that she's using the word only because one time is too many. That's the first thing. The second thing is, with the accounts that we've heard, with the doctor, with her brother for multiple years, with the neighbor, with all these different people, she's saying that what she had was minimal. Put that into context. Though my own memories haunted me, my greatest anguish was for Laura after hearing Dad talk about some of the bar, bar, barbarities she'd suffer from her own father. I remember with agonizing clarity years before at the girls' camp when she had awakened with us with her blood curdling screams and fits of terror. She couldn't tell a soul what was wrong, fearing she or someone else would be killed. She had no way, no words, no clue how to plead for help and safety. In my ignorance, I believed the opinions of my parents and others over my soul's warnings. I was told I was the one with evil attitudes towards John and Gregory. It was I who was told to pray for and help for understanding. But the reality was, I hadn't learned to honor my soul above everyone else. And I let Laura's despicable father take her away into the night. As if you could have stopped him, Sophia, my therapist told me a few weeks after I heard Dad's recordings. You need to forgive yourself for not knowing what to do differently. None of you were taught how to defend yourselves or anyone else. That's true. No one, even in your own family, noticed your subconscious disappearances as something to be wary of. And even when many of the victims themselves continue to tell their own parents about the abuses, they weren't believed by those who should have made a difference. Very true. For many days and nights, I continue to feel a sense of responsibility and remorse beyond description. If only I could have known what to do, maybe I might have made a difference for Laura and others. I had to make amends. I sent a long letter asking her to please forgive me as I was working on forgiving myself. Beautiful. Courageous Laura said she had nothing to forgive me for. With love, she encouraged me to get my own forgiveness done very soon. She's right. I was breaking the fundamentalist womanly sister-wife rules of servitude and obedience. I was no longer adhering to the creed of the therein holds my womanly virtue and value. John Thomas' countless sermons about our womanly duties of blind obedience to husbands and priesthood leaders made me sick enough to vomit. I was thankful I'd already begun to honor my soul. For years, we heard of all sorts of promises and blessings, including more plural wives and endowments for worthy recipients, while in reality, those were quite often given to those who were good at kissing up and winning spiritual brownie points. They were for abusers, adulterers, men who were laundering money, embezzling tithing funds, trading daughters, and marrying relatives. Those gifts went to men who already had more children and wives than they could or would financially or emotionally sustain. The blessings had been and were still for all of the Johns and Gregorys who had been sheltered and protected under the auspices of religious piety and kinship. My list of reasons to leave fundamentalist Mormonism had become longer and more valid than my motives for staying. I began to see the numerous flaws in a religion said to be perfect. I was beginning to discover and honoring my soul's integrity. And lastly, I was discovering the meaning of real happiness. For too many years, I'd observed the mostly unhappy but righteous loved ones all around me. I noted too many broken and changed rules, deceptions, and lies. In the end, it was the false God of my fundamentalist religion who had called Gregory and John to be leaders, and it was their sadistic behaviors that finally spurred me to completely abandon the God of fundamental Mormon beliefs. How could I trust the God of my childhood who called those evil men as council members? And this is part of the reason why you have to be careful about who you hold in certain regard, who you promote to certain positions, because you can end up deterring someone from being a part of something for that very reason. Now, let's be clear. These men deserved to get whatever they have coming their way. We still don't know what's been done to them. And these men should have never been leaders. But here's the thing with this faith. They look to men to be leaders. And Too much power is put in the hands of people that you have people who felt that there was something wrong about these guys and yet they were still raised up. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. My childhood soul had spoken the truth to me since I was tiny. My adult soul saved the lives of my children and me. She honored, loved, and valued me. Even as a child, my soul whispered in my ears to tell me I was valuable and good when no one else did. My soul was always truthful. When I listened to her rather than to the many people-pleasing ego or good intentions of the Samaritans in my life, my soul prodded me in the right direction. She awarded me with love, truth, and happiness. She knew where I'd been and where I needed and wanted to go. My goddess soul would be the God I would trust, at least for the present time. I spent too many years of anguish watching myself and others constantly fail, a life fraught with impossible rules and laden with bribes and threats. I decided to choose heaven. I quit attending church meetings on a regular basis without the constant coercion for blessings we could never earn, and the fear of damnation expounded from the pulpit. Sundays with my family became mellow, joyous, and rewarding. And that is the end of chapter 37. What's the time? I'm cutting it close here. Do I have time? Might be pushing it. Chapter 38. Life and Runaway Carolyn. Okay, y'all. Okay, I'm pushing it, but I'm going to do it. So I might not talk as much. Whenever possible, between my classes, teaching, Head Start, Mark's work, and our multitude of duties, Mark and I have met for lunch, dinner, a movie, lovemaking, and more gab sessions to discuss and debate anything and everything. I began to appreciate and respect some of his philosophical beliefs, and thoughts I considered to be hideous while cemented to my fundamentalist ideas. With our newfound physical and emotional intimacy, we became renewed friends, lovers, and comrades, far more than we'd ever been before. Mark was forever delivering flowers to me in fun, crazy ways. We craved and appreciated each other in the many ways each of us gave and received. In the past, we were never able to live in peace because my strong religious views always came between us. However great it may have been to no longer be divided in that way, I now lacked the religious reason to share the man I loved. The only reason I continued being a plural wife, other than for our children's sake, was my newfound love for Mark. That became the ultimate irony. Still, nothing stopped me from being concerned about Diane, her feelings, her life, or Mark's taking or stealing her time for our escapades. The first few months when I bring it up to him, he reprimand me. It's my life, my money, my energy, and thoughts. They're mine. They are mine alone unless I decide to share them. Where, when, why, how, and who I spend my time with is no one's business but my own. So quit worrying about it, Sophia. It took me a few more times to realize he was absolutely right. It was the same with all of us. I was not accountable for Mark's relationship with Diane, his kids, or anyone else. I was discovering my own responsibilities were to my underage children and myself. That was part of my new understanding about life. But changing my beliefs was quite different from suddenly being able to alter my actions, feelings, and habits. I was working really hard to let go and live. More and more, I openly joined Mark in his disenchantment with and defection from the religious dogmas we've been raised to adhere to. Unless I felt our children were being abused, I stepped aside from their conflicts with Mark as well. It was tough, but I was refusing to be our family's relationship fairness monitor any longer. In the past, I was too worried about being fair to Diane to consciously take part in a torrid love affair with Mark. Lingering in the back of my mind was always the turnaround. I would wonder, if Mark spends this much time with me when it's Diane's supposed time, he has probably done things the other way around when I was too busy in survival mode to care or notice. I figured if the tables were ever turned, I wouldn't stick around. I envisioned, not only for myself, but because I love Diane, she would have courage to find the happiness she deserved with a man who would love and be with her only, but I felt sure she'd never go in that direction, no matter how many inequalities she felt there were between us. Friends wondered why Diane seemed to be in denial about Mark's and my love affair, but as I had often done before, she too may have moved herself into survival mode, choosing to keep her eyes closed tightly to anything painful or threatening, no matter what she knew or didn't want to know about what Mark was doing behind her back. She loved him too. She always would. See, that's the part I struggle with. Like, Diane gets on my nerves at times, and I don't like a lot of the stuff that she was done, and I felt like she was selfish at times. But then you go and do the same thing. I don't know, just it's reading a little differently this chapter to me. I don't know why. It certainly wasn't her fault. I resented her mental presence in the middle of our love affair. The more in love I became, the more difficult it was to stay. When I had expressed that unease to Mark, he reminded me of the allegiance I owed him, Diane, and our family. I don't owe you anything. I don't owe you anything. After all, you're the one who persuaded me to marry her, and both of us made commitments to her, he'd say emphatically. We have to honor them. Or he'd say, you know I can't leave Diane, as if he thought I was asking or demanding him to leave her. But I can't and won't do this without you, Sophia. I've always believed in plural marriage. I've known all my life I live it. I always will be a polygamist. So I don't want to leave her, but you can't leave. Okay, Sophia, you know where you stand. Do what you got to do. Your remarks sound like all three of us have to stay in polygamy just because we started there, I told him. And you know darn well I am not asking you to leave her. I'm ticked off you would even insinuate for a split second I'd ever expect you to. I might like you to be able to, but we both know neither of us could live with ourselves if you left her for me. If the day ever comes, I can't live this way any longer, I will have to be the one who leaves. I know, Sophia. I wish I could help you more, to make things more bearable for you, to love and kiss all of your heart aches away. It was hard for me to. Sometimes even I cry when I have to leave, but you know I have to. During my first 2 years attending SLCC, Mark's perseverance was sometimes stronger than my own. His encouragement and assistance with our kids, the housework, the meals were not only appreciated and admired by me, but by everyone else as well. Teaching and going to school part-time was holding me back from graduating as quickly as I needed and wanted to, so I decided to quit teaching and become a full-time student. For the next 2 years, I took 12 to 18 credit hours per quarter. Those days and hours were grueling. Along with mine, Mark's patience started growing thinner by the day. We hardly had any quality time together. When I could be home with the kids, he would steal me away alone. Of course, I felt guilty for leaving the kids, for buying a muffin on campus, or for going out to dinner without them when there was too little food at home. I missed my kids so much. I wasn't playing with them and helping them enough. I felt so guilty for feeling guilty. I was cracking again. When I tried to study at home, I'd often hear Mark losing his temper with the kids. I rest my forehead on my textbooks and notes and sob. So if he's being that, if his discipline requires your sobbing, then that's not right. I dreamed of a good-natured, patient, doting child sitter for their sake, so I could relax, learn, and get my schooling done without feeling such torment for being away from them so much. To top it all off, I became suspicious when Mark was gone from me and our home at times that were considered my time. Maybe Mark's turnaround was already happening. Yet, it didn't feel right to try to change him or his decision, so I moved into distraction and my own life again. I did what I always did to stay sane. I kept my mind, body, and heart busy in other directions, but this time was different. If Mark could have a love affair with Diane, I could have one too. When a staunch LDS philosophy professor and I passionately debated religion and philosophy, we began to justify our flirting around my marriage situation. But for long, we found ourselves creating intellectual and emotional highs before and after class. The great part of those brain-teasing rendezvous was no matter how much we cared for each other, we were both very safe. I knew he would never ask me to commit adultery with him. His were religious reasons, and mine were based on my personal values. While I foolishly tested the possible grounds of freedom from Mark, while he held to his convictions to forever be a polygamist, I participated in crazy advance and retreat experiments until the professor had finally had enough. Another instructor at SLCC told his students about his Boy Scout outings and church callings, but his prejudice and blatant disdain towards polygamists was manifest in his words and cruel treatment of me. My name and our address must have been the dead giveaway from the first day of class. He delighted in setting up situations and then snatching every possible opportunity to ridicule and embarrass me in front of other students. When I attempted to refute his accusation that I had cheated on a test, which every student in class knew wasn't true, and of being immoral, he rudely interrupted and and meted out more unjust and vile comments. His malicious behaviors tore open and salted my myriad of not so ancient and recurring wounds. In his classroom, I never felt safe. Sometimes I go into the ladies' room and cry in the stall. I wasn't brave enough to explain to my peers the reasons behind his contempt when they'd ask me, why on earth does he treat you so harshly? How does he get away with that? Because ain't none of y'all going to complain. Everybody need to go to whoever and complain. Y'all got to be careful with these people, especially teachers and stuff. Even professors will act out. Why don't you report him to the dean? I could no more go to an authority then than I could as a child and teen. She's been taught that she shouldn't. After kindergarten, I had no protection from principals or teachers. My childhood fears and distrust of outsiders, especially Mormons who had been my arch enemies throughout my lifetime, were still holding me at bay. I wanted to get out of his class, college, homework, and stress. I wish I could have run until I felt like a cougar again, until I run so fast I could take flight and never return. Already overwhelmed, it took me nearly 3 months to pull through that thrashing. But with my 12-step friends on my side, encouraging me to keep going, to not listen to the nasty old man's crap, my inner drive egged me on. You'll have to deal with someone's shit no matter when, where, or how far you go, Sophia. One precious 12-stepper and outspoken LDS soul sister I trusted told me in private conversation, just remember, Sophia, they are the ones behaving like horses' asses. Then she giggled. In June 1995, at the age of 43 and a half, I proudly and finally graduated with an associate's degree in early childhood and elementary education. I wasn't expecting her to say an associate's, not downplaying it, I'm just saying. Other than giving birth to my children, that was the second time I felt such a grand sense of accomplishment and satisfaction. Mark, most of my children and my sisters, Amy and Jolie, and a few other friends watched me graduate with a 3.8 GPA and on the dean's list. You go, girl. I had the privilege of working full-time at Children First as an education coordinator assistant. Many privately owned as well as state and federally funded daycares were beginning to require their child care providers to complete 120 hours of training to obtain Childhood Development Associate Certificate. All Head Start teachers and assistants were required to have a Child Development Associate Certificate. With my associate degree in early childhood development, I'd already completed those valuable CDA courses through Head Start staff trainings and with Children First. It was the most rewarding and enjoyable job I could have ever imagined. In the evenings, we taught classes with an emphasis on competency-based curriculum that would be individualized to the needs and experiences of the families and children. During our busy prep days, we wrote grant proposals for ongoing government assistance and set CDA classes across the state of Utah. In addition to those jobs, I observed and took anecdotal records of each prospective candidate, teaching techniques, actions, and qualities, or the lack thereof, in the daycare of Head Start facility that they worked at. After several of those appointments, we met with the providers to discuss the outcomes. Working with those amazing women and a few men was fun and rewarding. However, I found I was discouraged and annoyed nearly everywhere I went. In the past few years at SLCC, I'd taken a zillion wonderful early childhood classes on developmentally appropriate practices, places, and activities, and learned pretty much everything research professed was best for young children. I was especially concerned about the school-age children who were at daycare while their regular school was not in session, when they needed and deserved what what they needed and deserved wasn't happening. When I complained to my boss, she agreed. Thanks to those classroom observations, the seeds were planted for me to start dreaming of a children's college. I envisioned a place that would accommodate elementary age students in the Jordan School District. Fees would be charged on a sliding scale based on families' income. The children would have the opportunity to learn and enjoy countless subjects within their realm of learning style and ability. In 1995 and 1996, there was nothing for Utah children that even compared to my archetype, at least that I was aware of. For the next year and a half while my kids were at school, I enthusiastically worked on my ideas. I spent time at the library learning how to write a business plan. I researched already existing daycare charges, locations, community-based statistics, and every need imaginable. I volunteered to work with the Utah State School-Age Child Care Association for the state of Utah to receive federal funding. We set up focus groups for parents across the country to determine their needs and what they desired from child care centers. Part of this research paved the way for my opportunity to fly to Washington, D.C. to attend a 3-day National School Age Care Seminar and Conference. The first week of November 1996, with much trepidation, Mark and I put our house up as collateral on a massive loan. Wow. After 22 years of payments on our home, the balance was only $16,000. I remember wondering if we'd ever get it paid off. Back then, $16,000 seemed like $1 billion. Now we're hawking it for more money than I could fathom. Not only our home, but also 2 others were required as collateral for our $500,000 SBA loan. After bringing in 2 financial partners who also risked their homes, we purchased 1.5 acres of land with a 2,400 square foot building where a semi-functional daycare center was taking place. Over that Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday, we remodeled the entrance. We planted flowers, a couple more trees and shrubs, and detailed the yard. Some of our friends and relatives helped paint and scrub carpets, furniture, and walls. We did everything else required by the state of Utah to update the codes for childcare licensing. Mark was incredible. For the next 5 grueling weeks, he worked all day long at his regular jobs and then worked late into the night and even the weekend with me. Our ultimate plan was to slowly and progressively revamp the place into the outstanding children's college we would desire for our own grandchildren. About the second week of December, shortly before we would reopen, Mark's resolve and energy came to an abrupt halt. I saw him every other night for the first few hours I could go home to sleep, and for a few minutes every other weekend. He said he'd already done all he could do to support my dreams and goals, and now all he could do was deal with the financial worries. I continued to prepare for the opening of the center. I purchased all the necessary food, school supplies, and toiletries, and hired 8 daycare providers who completed their child developmental associate certificates and were ready for 85 children to show up. We opened our doors on January 7th. Only 12 of those 85 children were listed on the rolls the previous director had given me showed up for care. In the next few months, I found several more significant problems. How you go from 85 to 12? We had to spend over $2,000 to repair the basement cracks after it filled with 2 feet of water and the faulty heating and cooling systems. I also discovered I'd been given false information about the previous daycare center's functionality and numbers. According to my figures, as well as my bookkeepers and bankers' figures, we would have been at breaking point when we opened and in a profit area with new enrollments within a few months. I had no other choice but to use our small amount of working capital to fix things and try to stay afloat. We were quickly sliding into the red by thousands of dollars. Red is not good, y'all. Through all of our dread, our enrollment rapidly increased the first month. Children were so happy to be there. They didn't want to leave at the end of the day, and parents were delighted to leave their children with our superior daycare providers. Okay. Carolyn, like her dad and me, had always taken the side of the underdog. She loved them all and desperately wanted to fix and save them. She brought home victims of abuse, real or imagined, who had been kicked out of their homes by their horrible, mean parents. But before we were aware, a few of her supposed friends talked 14-year-old Carolyn into getting fixed with a few drugs. While all of my time was consumed with my business struggles, with Carolyn became worse by the minute. She quit helping at the center, and when she got permission to go somewhere with her friends, she often didn't return home for hours or days. She would sometimes call to tell me she'd be home, and still she wouldn't show up. Makes me grateful for my child, because yeah, ain't no way. From the middle of December to the end of January, my life was totally consumed by my daycare center. Both partners held full-time jobs. Mark had quit, and I was trying to do everything myself. My jobs were teacher, driver, director, janitor, bookkeeper, cook, and manager. I had to show up at the center at 5 a.m. and stay until nearly midnight every night, but Sundays. With Carolyn taking advantage of my insane workload, my other children's needs and concerns, my fragile marriage, long hours, and financial stress, I lost 23 pounds in 6 weeks. My body trembled and I cried nearly all the time. I knew I couldn't keep going alone. With my credit card money, I hired an assistant bookkeeper, director, bus driver, and a part-time student janitor to help us survive. My assistant director was great. With her help, I had a few minutes to breathe. But no matter what I tried, by the end of January, I knew I couldn't keep my dream alive without massive amounts of working capital. We had absolutely bottomed out all personal resources as well. My banker said that they had already loaned me the maximum amount possible, and every other seemingly plausible option was negated by another problematic issue. There were several wonderful families who pled with me to make our place stay afloat. Those grateful, caring, and generous parents, loan officers, still wouldn't have been enough to pay our bills and pay someone to take over for me while I left to go find my missing daughter. With every review of our budget and situation, the bottom line was Carolyn, my other children, my marriage, my health had to be my first priorities. I'd have to let the center go. In April 1997, my dream of a children's utopia ended about as quickly as it started. Most of the teachers and families of the 47 daycare children we'd enrolled were distraught. Some were even cantankerous. They'd been let down after such a dynamic buildup. As soon as my Utah School-Age Child Care Association conference in Florida was complete, I ended every obligation with them, closed the center doors, and set out to get Carolyn back home. The sad thing is that she had a good idea, but she moved too quickly. Just my opinion. While I spent my last days and nights searching for her, more pangs of anger and resentment toward me and God filled my heart. The whole time I had planned and visualized the children's college, I begged that God still held a tiny residual of hope and belief to let my dreams not fade away. Please do anything it takes to halt this thing. Don't let it survive in my heart if it's meant to be, I prayed. But as in the past, to add to all of his previous villainous deeds, traitorous deeds, God had also allowed Carolyn's wayward insurrections. My dreams were gone, and my precious Carolyn was on the streets. I carried a few pictures of her at some of the homes where I believe she'd been hiding out. People told me they didn't know who she was. Those who did admit she'd been there and wouldn't tell me. She must have just ditched me again. With the help of other drug-using kids or adults, she was long gone and in another hideout by the time I arrived. After a week of searching without any luck, I reported her missing in a runaway. I kept in daily contact with the Salt Lake City and Sandy City police departments to give pertinent information or to receive any news. 3 or 4 times the police picked up her and her friends for truancy and dropped them off at youth services. Then I'd pick her up from there. She would stay home in her room for a day or two while she slept off another crystal methamphetamine-induced stupor, and then she'd be gone again. With each disappearance, she was gone for longer durations and called me less and less. I searched her drawers for numbers and addresses. A few lucky times when I got a mother or another person to put her on the phone, she'd rage at me. You're crazy, insane, mother. Just leave me the hell alone and let me have my own life. I won't let you stop me from finding her and getting her back, I screamed at the God who prodded his way back into my life. My determination to save Carolyn and God's resolve to punish us yet another time became the ultimate dispute between me and the deity of my childhood. I will win, I told myself before I made several more calls. I buckled Anne and Keith into the car, drive all over, and hit the streets again. During all of this, my business partners, Mark and I, sold literally everything in the daycare to make our monthly $1,500 payments until the building sold. All of us tried not to freak out too much about the possibility of losing our homes. For a few months, I walked more neighbors from one side of the valley to the other. I walked more neighborhoods from one side of the valley to the other. I asked everyone for leads and left pictures of her with our phone number. At the homes where she'd been hiding out, I was either shunned or revered as I continued to warn her alleged friends, their siblings, and parents not to harbor my underage daughter or I would press charges. Mark's and my relationship was full of disaffection. His fury toward Carolyn in her ongoing absence was more than I could stand. As unsuccessful days turned into weeks, then another month, I continue. Whew. In the videotapes playing in my mind, I'm just sitting here and I'm thinking about how that has to feel, having your child out on the street, addicted to drugs, not being there. You try to have a business. It also deterred you from being there. And your husband is just mad at the whole situation while you're just trying to find your daughter. And the videotapes playing in my mind, I regretted the fights between Carolyn and me, regretted not spending more time in laughter and play, regretted not standing in between her and her dad's fights and the malicious words he often directed at her. A million of my shortcomings haunted me. One many of those long, miserable hours and days of worry, my eyes would again be swollen from tears. I could hardly see where I was driving. My only solace was my precious children who were home with me and available to love and enjoy. I would never give up on Carolyn. No earthly acquisition would ever be worth more to me than my children. I'd give up everything for them if I've had to. All right. I hate to end on that note, but y'all see it's been over an hour. So we'll pick up again. Until next time.